Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rocha Lima.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast is brought to you by Holland Harn & Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harn & Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm joined today by Forbes Low. Forbes is the owner of Forbes Design, an independent graphic design firm based here in Kingston. Forbes is also the current chief executive of the Kingston Chamber of Commerce, one of the largest borough chambers in London. What's unique about Forbes is how he's been taking all of his experience as a long-standing member of the chamber and translating it into initiatives to both help new members feel welcomed into the chamber, as well as to create business synergies between the many chamber members in our community. So whether you're interested in knowing more about running a successful graphic design business or want to know more about the Kingston Chamber of Commerce, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Welcome, Forbes Low, to the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm really excited about our conversation today, Forbes, because not only do I want to hear more about your background in graphic design, but also because I think you have a lot to share with us on the thriving business community here in Kingston, especially given your capacity as chief executive of our local Chamber of Commerce. But before we kick off, I wouldn't mind taking a step back in time, if that's okay. So,
in my case, it's a very long step back.
You grew up around Kingston, right?
Yes, the family moved over. I was born in Manchester. We went to Wales, and then we came over to New Malden when I was 8.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went to Coombe Hill Junior School, and then went to Kingston Grammar School, and then went to Knights Park, and I did my art foundation at Kingston University. So yeah, I've been around here since 8, really.
Now, given your role today in our business community, Forbes, I'm curious, what is your first memory of money?
The first big purchase in terms of realizing sort of the money and sort of what it can get was probably for Christmas. I received a yellow chopper bike, which nice. I don't know if any of those can remember. They were really the most desirable gift and present at Christmas was a chopper bike. Unfortunately, mine was bright yellow, which wasn't the desired choice. So it looked a little bit of a, it did stand out a little bit too much.
Yeah.
But I think I've always managed to do kind of odd jobs for my parents around the house. My first full job was really working in a record shop in New Malden. And it was very much sort of, you got your money, and then with me, it was just going back and spending it straight onto records or tapes, really. But that's really from once about 14, 15 of actually earning some money, which is good.
That's really good. And Forbes, how did you first get into graphic design?
Really, I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer in so much that at school and everything else, the best thing which I could ever do was draw. I could always draw things.
Okay.
And so I was always... that's what I was always encouraged to do. That's what I always favoured doing. That's what I did in my spare time. And really, I think I may have said this at some point before, but Kingston Grammar School were incredibly good in terms of allowing me to do art A-level, and they really hadn't done art A-level before. So they allowed me to be one of the first people to do it because they viewed that maybe I had some degree of potential of going off to art school. And that is what I did. I think I was one of the few people to leave that school going to art school. And from there on in, it's just been a fantastic journey.
Obviously, you own Forbes Design, and I think it was you and your firm that were responsible for the rebrand of the Kingston Chambers in 2016-17. Is that right?
Yes, guilty.
Okay. So I think a lot of our listeners are interested sometimes in the process that different professionals go through to do what they do. And obviously today we've got a beautiful logo and great branding for the Kingston Chamber of Commerce. But for the benefit of our listeners, would you mind talking us through the process that you went through in this case study as an example?
For this particular case study, it's really starting off is that it's trying to make sure that the process doesn't become too complicated and you overthink about what you're trying to do. There were some key kind of ingredients which were needed in the logo. They were the fish, the blue, and the elements of water, and obviously the title. There were the arches of Kingston Bridge, but essentially you're trying to not kind of pull in too much information in terms of all the emotive values which the chamber can provide, and all the different elements, the aspirations and things like that. You just keep it down to its kind of core ingredients. So we had a previous logo which had got very tired, very static, and not really particularly modern. When Robert O'Dowd came on as president, he essentially said, look, we really need to change some gears in how we present things. So you start off with the basic elements. I was appealing to the executive board, and you sort of go from a position of sort of a comfort zone of what a logo could look like, to then you stretching it out to the sort of further edges of sort of what you wouldn't necessarily expect. So you kind of go from a comfortable position through to a fairly unexpected extreme end of those elements, and then somewhere in between you kind of hopefully find a path and direction which people think, okay, well, it's moved on from where we are. It's not as adventurous as the far right, but it's here. And actually, the process between the members at the exec was fairly uncontentious and quite smooth. There was a range of professions there which you wouldn't necessarily say were sort of on the creative line of judging these things, but they were all constructive, and I was actually expecting a little bit of a tougher time with it, but we managed to get quite a few of the key elements sorted out quite quickly, and I think it does work. Actually, I'm actually quite proud of it. I think it works really quite well.
I was just wondering, is there a lesson there for other businesses in terms of how they perhaps could better portray what they do via their design into the world?
The thing about design, and it's a process of, it is about communication, which is an extremely broad word, obviously, but it really is trying to tell a story. And I say this many, many times. It's designers to kind of tell the best story possible, to make it clear, to make it almost bilingual in terms of understandable in different languages and to different mindsets. So somebody can look at something and actually understand what the story is. I think, and it's really, really over time and maybe with greater experience that you learn the process of actually eliminating and trying to cut out elements or narratives which get in the way of the core feature, the core point. I'm a firm believer in the kind of the number 3 of trying to distill something down into 3 bullet points, and just that process of distillation and distilling it down to get to the core of what you're trying to do. And also it's got to have a benefit. again, over the years, I've worked with many designers who just work with this kind of the notion of, well, it looks aesthetically, look at it, it's so attractive. Attractiveness has to happen. It's a key feature. That's why Apple, the Apple watches, the Apple products have always, from the very start, it is aesthetically attractive. But then it has to have the functionality. And between the functionality and the attractiveness, it then has to have that, obviously, benefit. What do you get out of this? The whole point about design is, what is the core message? What is it that you're wanting to say? And I think there's a lot of people who tend to think and don't have the confidence of actually just being able to sort of put their finger on it. They feel as if, but we have to add this, we have to add that. And it's just like, as soon as you start layering it up, the clarity of the message gets weaker. It takes confidence. It genuinely does take confidence to actually strip things right back. But that is the clearest way of telling a story.
The simpler the story, the more powerful that message can be. And then it can be replicated easily via word of mouth, via other marketing initiatives, etc. So Forbes, what do you think the role of graphic design is in a business?
Graphic design, as I said earlier, is essentially, it is the art of communicating. And graphic design is there as a presence, whether it's on your website, on your flyer, even on your business card. It is there representing you as a person, as a business, when you're not in the room. So that is the piece which is on the desk, which is on this, in your wallet, on your laptop. It is the voice for you.
Okay, so Forbes, let's bring this conversation a bit more up to the present. Tell me a little bit about your journey from being a member of the Kingston Chamber of Commerce to being its chief executive today.
I still kind of pinch myself to a certain degree, because I feel incredibly fortunate and very, very flattered to be in this position at the moment. But I can still remember the very first day that I became a member. Well, I went to my first networking breakfast, and it was I was absolutely terrified. And what I didn't realize was that my card was pulled out deliberately, so because I was a new member, and you just babble away, and you're thinking, "Oh bloody hell, I really can't do this." But just being so in awe of sort of the businesses there, and you looked at sort of the personalities and the characters, and you're thinking, "Gosh, this is kind of quite impressive," and just quite overawed and quite intimidated to a certain degree. And then I just started putting my hand up. I sort of said, "Yeah, I'll go along to the curry night. I'll go along to this, and I'll go to the drinks reception in the evening," and just started getting to know people and just started getting involved because I was actually enjoying it. I was very fortunate that actually, and still is, one of my longer clients is a homeless charity over in Canning Town. There happened to be somebody who was working with them, and she says, "Oh, they're doing a rebranding exercise." And that was in my second network breakfast that I met a lady called Anne Cooper. And so I went along, and I thought, well, this is a fantastic opportunity. Blitzed the design interview, and to this day, I'm still working with them 10 years later. And that's the serendipity of it all. You never kind of quite know who you will actually end up talking to. I was fortunate that it was in the second breakfast, but I've seen it with other people. It takes a little bit longer, but it can happen. And then gradually over the years of just putting my hand up, getting involved, they kindly invited me onto the board. So as a director, got more involved in that. And then somehow kind of floated up through to the exec, became vice president, but really it's just because either I'm a nosy Parker or I just like getting involved. I don't like just being a passenger. I just want to get into it. And the more I kind of floated through the process and the system, the more I was enjoying it, the more I could see all the different narratives, all the different ways things were happening or not happening. And then you just started seeing a much bigger picture, which was really kind of very interesting and quite exciting. I was allowed to get into the sort of more involved in the expos, and you just saw the mechanisms of how this really worked. So I was very grateful that the opportunities were given, but equally I'd say I just kept getting involved.
I really appreciate you sharing your experience of your first breakfast at the Kingston Chamber of Commerce, because of course it wasn't that long ago that I had my first networking breakfast. So to start unpacking some of what you said there, how would you suggest someone gets the most out of their membership of the Kingston Chamber of Commerce?
There's different layers to it. It's all to do with managing expectations and really trying to be honest with yourself as to why you are there. There's obviously the approach that you're obviously there because you'd like to pick up new business. There's the next line, which is you want to be a part of a kind of a business community. And then thirdly, there's an element of, if you are a small business, of gaining some degree of social friendships and extending a network like that. I think you need to slightly kind of work out, why are you there? It might be all three. I think if you can go in with saying it is all three, you have a better chance of making it a very sustainable and enjoyable membership. If you go there purely on the basis, I want new work, I want business, you're losing 2/3 of a really, really good package. And inevitably, that expectation level of I'm just there for the work, it won't be enough. It isn't a BNI. The nature of it is a lot more relaxed. It's a little bit more informal. It's much more conversational. There's no pushiness in it. So the nature of getting work through, you might be fortunate, you might be lucky, you might, by sheer personality, things may start coming through to you. But if you just do it on that line alone of I just want business, it's a much tougher and probably less pleasurable membership that you're going to get.
And that social element of getting to know other local businesses, figuring out if there's some synergies in working together, which I'm sure we'll touch upon later in the show. I think that's huge.
It is, and I think there's obviously chamber members who do a mixture. There are some who do BNIs. They do sort of women in business. There's different strands and different ways of doing networking. The chamber is a much it is a less formal, it is a much more sort of conversational style chamber. And actually I've seen over the many years that when you do get somebody, bless them, you kind of come in a much more kind of here's my card, bang, 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 kind of networky, really pushy way. You can see almost people go, oh, what do you do? It's sort of, this is the way we do it. People like to have a conversation, build that up and sort of get that familiarity, and then it builds up from there. But the thing about the chamber, Amir, is that, and I noticed this at a very early stage, and certainly during Jerry's tenure as CEO, was that there is a real very natural sense of people wanting to help other businesses. If there is an opportunity, if there is something which they see or they pick up, they are willing to help and to sort of recommend and to help people navigate their way through it. And I've seen that at a very, very early stage, and that actually has never faded away. And in fact, I'd say it just gets stronger. But there's almost that core to how the chamber works. Is if there's a recommendation, if there's a way of supporting and just nudging somebody along, the members are very good at doing that. We can do as a chamber team, we can do a lot of prep, we can promote, we can push, we can say, this is what's going on. Once those doors open, whether it's at a breakfast to an expo or anything else, there are resources, and what we can do is quite limited to a degree. We can try and, by our own personal natures, try to make it engaging, but it is really, the floor is for the membership. And I think when I looked at the expo, I was so proud of how businesses were getting involved, chatting, talking, seemingly to enjoy it. And it's the same for a breakfast. It's like, you say, go on, push you, and they take it themselves.
Forbes, given the amount of small and medium-sized businesses around the country and in our borough, I think my experience at least tells me that a lot of these small businesses find themselves working in vacuums. And again, that's something else that we've seen that the chamber can really add some value to. It's in helping find those synergies between members so that people can see that there are other local businesses that could potentially help them. In your capacity as chief executive of the chambers, obviously you speak to a lot of businesses in the borough. Could you share with us some of your insights?
I've had my own business for 20 years, so I've experienced having quite a few staff at various points, and also just kind of ploughing my own kind of line. So I have a lot of empathy for sort of the smaller business end of the business community, because there's the kind of the impression, if they're small, that they're not ambitious or they're not capable of delivering or something else like that. There's enormous ability with a lot of our members and with smaller businesses. They've just taken that particular path. And I think you are right in terms of people being in little bubbles. And larger businesses are in bubbles and vacuums. And I think that's what I've learned, particularly in the last 2 months, is one little bubble just doesn't know what its neighbour's doing. And really it's trying to break down those barriers to sort of allow things to flow across, that people understand what everybody is actually trying to do. It's been quite remarkable, actually, how there's so much overlap, and I think it really is a mindset, and I think it's a natural mindset for small businesses. You have to be determined. There isn't that much sort of support or resources elsewhere, so you kind of go in your own direction. Where the chamber, where I kind of knock on the door there, is just say, you can continue doing that, but actually people around the edges here from the chamber could actually be a good asset to you, so you can plug into it, and not necessarily, and don't be by yourself. Working in vacuums is not particularly a healthy condition.
So growing the participation of the members and encouraging them to form or enhance strategic partnerships for the benefit of both their businesses and their clients. With this in mind, Forbes, are there any initiatives or projects in the pipeline for the Kingston Chamber of Commerce that you could share with us?
Okay, it's a good question. Well, I mean, for example, the previous breakfast, I know this all feels slightly trivial, but it's actually, to me, it's actually kind of quite important, because what I'm trying to do is get people to share something about themselves which they wouldn't necessarily do in that particular environment. So the last breakfast, I sort of said, and I gave everybody a warning and sort of said, look, share with us something which you've learned in this last month. And it was a brilliant response,
absolutely,
by the members, because they either pulled something from a work point of view, and actually most of them did it from a personal point of view. And actually that was really enlightening. And actually there were some fantastic little gems of stories in terms of their personal relationships with home, with their family. And you're making it more human, you're making it more tangible, and sort of think, oh, that's what that person's like. And you're just chipping away at the barriers and just giving that a little bit more sort of warmth, a little bit more individuality, that we can then all kind of reach out to it and think, that's what so-and-so's like. And I think all we're trying to do, in my mind, is sort of, and there will be a range of different questions, but it's really just trying to sort of broaden up this element of the community, and sort of your partners could be right next to you. I would like to encourage and continue pulling that thread so that we just share beyond work what we are doing, because I think the more that we do that, the more that it will actually come around 360 degrees. It's all about sort of liking people, thinking that's common background, and just thinking, they've gone up in my estimation, and boom, brilliant.
That's it.
That's really what you want. Going back to the original question in terms of relationships and connections, I think the other thing which there has been a certain I've personally noticed is that what I'm going to try and do is that every sort of 4 weeks, probably every 6 weeks or so, is kind of do a CEO perspective email blast. And I just want to tell other stories which go beyond what our regular members may see at networking events. So just showing my dealings with the council, what's going on with them, talking about our patron members, what's going on. So there's kind of the normal membership events, and then just telling the stories of what's going on elsewhere.
As you've transitioned over the last 2 months from being a member of the Kingston Chamber of Commerce and a business owner to being its chief executive, what are some of the insights you could share with us, or some of the lessons you've learned so far?
I have to say that I've had 2 months and I've really, really enjoyed the role. As I said earlier, I think it's a huge honor, and I don't use that glibly, because there's a lot of people who have invested so much emotional energy and time and commitment to the chamber. There are some very, in my mind, very quite admirable people who have been presidents, following in Jerry's enormous footsteps. So I realize that this is a position which carries a lot of weight and significance. So it's really, it is very humbling to be given this opportunity. But I have to say that, first of all, the chamber team is immense. The knowledge, the experience, and the just decent kind of common sense which Amanda, Natalie, and Wanda have. There's been many times I've gone home thinking I'm not entirely sure what I'm there for, because they really know they know what they're doing, and they have such good commercial sense, and people only see them at the breakfast and the network events. They work way beyond the hours which they normally have to work, and they're always thinking, what is the best way that we can do things? They are always on the front foot. They're always thinking why we should do things. They do have to say no. They have to draw certain lines, but they're always on the front positive foot, which I've been so impressed with them. And then on the broader level, the membership. I mean, they've been so gracious in terms of sort of saying, good for you, supporting. I've been really touched by the friendliness and the warmth that they've given me to sort of say, good for you, go for it. There are some wonderful businesses. There's some great personalities. There's a real great mixture, but really they are working hard, trying to do their best, really trying to do it in Kingston, and really trying to sort of be proud of what is with them, around them, and their friends. There's a lot of camaraderie, there's a lot of friendships, and I've seen it before, but when you kind of go on to the other side of sort of being a member to the role which I've got nothing but praise for their ability to just get stuck in and be involved.
So Forbes, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you 3 quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested to hear. So firstly, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
Ooh. There's 2 things really. Every second weekend, I fly over to Dublin to see my daughter. My daughter's 12 or 13 now. She'll kill me for that. So every second weekend, I'm over in Dublin seeing her, and that's really precious time. Even though I'm a bit of a glorified taxi driver now, it's still really, really good to have my time with her. It's just the 2 of us. And it's great just being able to switch off with her, and just completely different kind of pace. So that's when I'm over there. When I'm here, walking. I do love long walks.
Nice.
I'm not a hiker by any stretch of the imagination, but walking my other half's dog, it's really, really relaxing. It's a good way of just getting out to the fresh air and really switching off.
That's really nice. So who are some of the people that you admire and why?
Okay. I think I probably said this several times. I'm a bit of a football nut, so I'm always inspired with biographies of managers, and currently it's the Man City manager Pep Guardiola, simply because he is a model of somebody who thinks out of the box. I think the ability of managers to deal with a large team, dealing with those egos, dealing with all the pressures of the media and everything else, and to still create, to actually produce fantastic teams which are giving enjoyment. That's what I totally admire about him, is that he doesn't mind about losing. He obviously, his record, he doesn't lose that often, but Absolutely. It's actually the creation. It is about when people go to watch a game, they come back and think, that was beautiful. And he was inspired by, when I was a kid growing up, was a great Dutch football team with Johan Cruyff. That whole emphasis was about the beauty of the game. So I think when we get tarnished with so many things which are dowdy and flat and not working, I find when you listen to somebody like Guardiola, he is challenging players. He's bringing in different ideas to make something really pleasurable. So it isn't just about football. It is the art of creating something quite memorable, which I think it's a rare skill. And then on a completely different tangent, somebody who I've always liked, and is particularly Marmite with a lot of people, is the film director David Lynch. I absolutely love his work. A lot of people find it incomprehensible, very dark, very disturbing. But again, the beauty of it is that he takes the notion of something very normal and then inverts it. He kind of turns it upside down and he looks at what goes on underneath. And he films it in a way, it's like an Edward Hopper painting. It's just beautiful. It's languid. It's very still. Every scene could be like a painting. But then he just twists it around the edges. And I love that playfulness of taking something which is very normal and then just twisting it right round. So it's that creative process, the unexpected.
What is your favorite book?
I think it has to be The Great Gatsby. F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. I think it has, at the end of it, one of the most powerful lines, just describing the nature of how we battle with the future, battle our past with the future. And it's so evocative. I think The Great Gatsby, I think that encapsulates so many things in our lives, really. That the aspiring to the emptiness of aspiring to something which is glittery and bright. It's a mirage, really. Great Gatsby.
I know you're a big music fan, Forbes, so I can't go without asking you this question, and I'm going to have to pin you down for one, if I may. What is your favorite album?
I think we always carry things from our youth to a certain degree. Bruce Springsteen's The River. I can still carry that today and listen to it, and it's still as fresh to me today as it was when I was about 15, I think.
Finally, Forbes, where can people go to find more about you, your business, and the Kingston Chamber of Commerce?
Well, physical location, obviously the Kingston Chamber is in the Guild Hall, which is in the middle of Kingston. There's the team there of Natalie, Wanda, and Amanda. Obviously, the Kingston Chamber website. Oh, one other point is that hopefully by October, we will have a Kingston Chamber app, maybe lagging behind the times to a certain degree, but I think the app is going to be a fantastic facility for our membership. And then for myself, I'm sort of the websites. On LinkedIn, I'm a firm believer in LinkedIn. So I do have a presence there. I tend to have a mailer which I send out, possibly not as often as I used to. It's called Engage, and that goes out every sort of 2 months. So just juggling between the two, really.
That's brilliant, Forbes. And I'll make sure that I add all of those links to the show notes. Thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Thank you very much, Amir.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.